Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Professor Deborah Johnston, the Pro-Director for Learning and Teaching here at SOAS, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Silence on Campus conference. This is the stage in any opening that I give that I say I have a stammer, I will get stuck on sounds, and it's going to be just fine. So here today, we're here to share knowledge about stammering. We're here to share insights, but most importantly, we're here to push for change. Change for people who stammer at university. And approximately 1% of all adults stammer, which means that there are more than 23,000 students in the UK higher education system who have a stammer. And despite that large size, we know that people who stammer in university are affected, can be affected in a range of ways. That first decision about whether or not to go to university in the first place, their choice of programme, their choice of module, their performance, their final marks, and importantly, their well-being. And these are the issues that we want to talk about today, but more importantly than that, we want to talk about what can be done to mitigate those negative impacts, to reduce them, to reverse them, so that people who stammer thrive at university. I'm particularly glad that this event is being held at SOAS, and there are three reasons. And the first reason is, for those of you who don't know SOAS, we are a social sciences, arts and humanities university. And about a third of our students take either a language programme or a language module. And those are often tested verbally. And we know that can be a particular site of disadvantage for people who stammer. Secondly, SOAS is a place of active discussion. We are famously a place for discussion and debate. And both students and staff are really interested and really concerned to challenge universities. Are universities inclusive? Are they as transformative as they should be? And the third reason is a personal reason. When I think about the awareness of issues that affect people who stammer, and when I think about the support for people who stammer at university, I'm not convinced that things have changed very much from when I first went to university 33 years ago. 33 years ago, and it feels so similar. And we do need change. We need change. Change is long overdue. So this event has been organised by the Stammerers through University Consultancy, and that group, STUCK, was conceived of and organised by Claire Norman. And Claire also designed and organised this event. So and she'll come on now to tell us more about the programme and the way the day will be run. But as she comes on, I think let's all show her our appreciation. Claire.
Thank you, Deborah. Hi, everyone, and thank you very much for coming, and hello to everyone who is streaming this live. I would like to welcome you all to Silence on Campus, Making a Noise About Stammering. This conference was an idea in my head a couple of years ago, and I thought, how good would it be to have a lot of universities in the same room to talk about best practice and how they would support people who stammer. And after a lot of social media work, Deborah was kind enough to offer this wonderful venue to host it, and I hope that you all really enjoy the day. So we have 8 presentations today by some of the most recognised speakers in the stammering community. After lunch, we will be Skyping to Australia, fingers crossed, as we will have a presentation from Grant Meredith from the Federation University. So this conference wouldn't have been possible without the help of so many people, but I'll tell you more about those people later. So in your brochures, there will be a page on social media, and you'll see all of the social media profiles of all of the panelists and the speakers for today. So please tag us in all of your social media posts during today, and also please use these two hashtags, get stuck in and silence on campus. Please do take photos too, but please make sure that the flash is turned off. We are going to be using Slido today for two sessions, one for the presentation by Dr. Lindsay Pike, and also for the Q&A panel session, which is near the end of the day. And there are also instructions on how to use that in your brochures as well. I will hand over back to Deborah to go over some of the formalities now.
Thank you, Claire. So the housekeeping rules, the essential things in every conference. The toilets are to my right. You go out, you go to the back of the foyer area, and there are both men's and ladies on the right-hand side. There are no fire drills planned for this morning, so if the fire alarm goes off, don't follow me, I'll be panicking. But please do follow the fire alarms, the fire exit signs to my left and to my right. And if people want to smoke, the area for smoking is outside in that main precinct. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand back to Claire. Thank you.
Okay, so without further ado, can you please show your appreciation for our first speaker of the day, Rachel Everard.
Thank you very much, and I'm delighted to be here today and to see many friendly faces in the audience, and some of whom I know and some of whom I don't know. I hope that you can hear me all right and it's clear. So I'm a speech and language therapist. I'm a person who stammers, and I'm really pleased to be talking to you today about landing your first job. So this is specifically advice for people who stammer. And Tim Fell, who's sitting just there, chair of the British Stammering Association, gave me a very useful piece of advice before starting this presentation about starting with a story. And fortunately, I had planned a story, so that fits in very well. So I can just about, even though it's quite a few years ago, remember when I had just graduated. I did a degree in modern languages. And I used to avoid saying that because I found the word languages really difficult to say. So I always used to say, French and German. But yes, I graduated a long time ago. And I remember applying for my first job. And I remember I had an interview at the Austrian Airlines. This was a very long time ago. And I actually was offered a job at Austrian Airlines. But I turned it down because I felt I would never be able to pick up the phone and say Austrian Airlines because I tend to stammer on vowels. So and I just was thinking as I was preparing this presentation how different my life trajectory would have been if I hadn't made that decision. So I'm quite pleased that I did make that decision and that I'm standing here today. So what I wanted to do over the next half hour was to go through these following areas. So first of all, making this decision to apply for a job, what might get in the way, and to think through that. Secondly, ideas around preparing for the interview, so some tips around that. And then going on to looking at, what could be really useful during the interview itself, and how to process what's happened afterwards, and finishing off with some useful resources, as well as time for questions. So I'm hoping that that's all going to fit in with the time. So first up, looking at making the decision to apply. So you've identified, you finished your degree or you're about to finish it, you've identified what looks like a really interesting job, you have the skills, you have the knowledge to do it, but what might get in the way? And often it's our thinking that can get in the way. And a commonly held thought for people who stammer, I appreciate everybody who stammers is different, but I remember very clearly having these kind of thoughts. Oh, I can't possibly go for that job because of my stammering. Now, there is a lot of evidence to show that people who stammer have a huge amount to offer in the workplace, and that employers are actually missing out on a lot when they do not employ people who stammer. The research shows that we, as people who stammer, offer creativity, resilience, empathy, listening skills, a whole range of qualities that we uniquely bring. And as you can see on this slide here, there's probably quite a few people who you recognise here and who are sitting in the audience as well, which is great. And I'm showing this because to make the point that people who stammer are employed in all different areas, and that there are lots of inspirational role models out there, a lot in this room today, but so this is just a small selection. But you've got Abid Ahmed, who's here, who's I think giving a talk later on, who's a teacher. You've got Claire Norman, of course, who just whose brainchild is this whole conference, who's an intelligence analyst. You've got Mandy Taylor, who's also here, who's a finance manager. Ian Wilkie, founder and co-chair of the Employer Stammering Network, as well as lots more, and I know Ian's going to be talking after me. You've got Jimmy Lang, who's a captain in the British Army. And those are just a few examples of people who stammer, who have done incredibly well in their chosen career, and whose stammer hasn't been a barrier or held them back from achieving what they wanted to do. So if you do find yourself having that thought, oh, I can't possibly go for that job because of my stammering, think about all those people who you will meet attending conferences like this or other events involving people who stammer, and you'll realise that actually we can succeed in whatever area we decide to go for. Another possible thought that might come up for you if you've identified that dream job but you think, I'm not sure if I can go for that, might be, there's no point me applying for that job. They're asking for good communication skills or excellent communication skills. And again, I'd just like to say that we know that communication doesn't equate to fluency. That communication is much more than the spoken word. So again, research backs this up by demonstrating that actually 7% of the actual words we use count for the effectiveness of the message we want to give. And much more important is our body language. So what I mean by that is our use of eye contact, gesture, facial expression. There's so much more that we convey through our body language, and also the tone of our voice, the quality of our voice. But fluency actually plays quite a small part of it. So what I'm saying here is that if you come across a job description which says good communication skills required, and that is very common and that's what you would expect, do not be put off by that, because we as people who stammer have very good communication skills, regardless of whether we stammer or not. So just want to make that point. And another thing that might come up for you when applying for a job is the thought that, as soon as they notice my stammer, they'll decide I'm not the right person for that job. Now, the image here is meant to illustrate this idea of it's very easy to fall into negative thinking traps. And that's the person falling into a negative thinking trap. And everybody everybody, again, regardless of whether they stammer or not, is likely to do that. And it's really useful to be able to stand back a little bit from your thoughts and to think, okay, so I'm having this thought, and is this really helping me at all? Is this making me more confident or less likely of having a go? And you'll probably find that there are a lot of thoughts that you have, and this is perfectly normal, that are actually unhelpful. And this one, for example, is what we call mind reading. So mind reading is when you imagine that you know what the other person is thinking. And we do this a lot. Now, I have got no idea what you're thinking at the moment. It might be that you're thinking, oh, I wish I'd had one of those pastries, or I wonder when lunch is, or oh, I wonder what's coming up next, or there could be all sorts of things going on in your heads, and I don't know. And I can choose to kind of get really focused on what I think you might be thinking. I might start thinking, I don't think they're enjoying this presentation, or they're looking a bit disengaged, and that will then affect perhaps how I continue. Or I can kind of think, well, actually, I don't know what you're thinking, but I know that what I'm saying is important, and having that confidence to say what I think. So, the point I'm making here is that it's often our thoughts that can get in the way, and we need to recognise that thoughts are just thoughts, and that it can be very helpful to step back from them and to notice them, and to get a bit of space between us and our thoughts so that they have less influence on our behaviour. So I'm going to do a little bit of an exercise with you now to help you do that. So I hope you're going to be willing to do that. Okay, I'm not going to ask you to share any thoughts. I'm just asking you to take part in this exercise. So I'd like you to think of a negative thought, unhelpful thought that you're aware of. And I just want you to think of that thought. So it can be anything you like. As I say, I'm not going to ask you to share that. And I'd like you to just run that through your mind again and again, this unhelpful negative thought. The example I've got here is, I can't do that job because I stammer. So if that's a thought for you, that's fine, but you might want to think of your own particular thought. So just let that run through your mind for a few seconds. Okay. And now I'd like you to experiment with putting in just a little bit of an extra phrase. I'm having the thought that, and then followed by whatever your thought was. So just going to allow a few seconds for that. I'm having the thought that. Okay. And now I'm going to ask you to do one more thing. So you're stepping back gradually from this thought, which is making that phrase a little bit longer. I notice I'm having the thought that. And again, that negative thought you might have. So just spending just a few seconds on that. Okay, so that's what we call a taste of diffusion. Diffusion is this idea of being able to get a little bit of distance between us and our thoughts. So actually this microphone is quite a good example. So I can be really close to the microphone, and that's when my thoughts are like this, really close and really distracting me and preventing me from doing the things I want. Or I can get a little bit of distance between myself and my thoughts. Just a little bit of feedback. Anybody like to share what that was like doing that brief exercise? It's all a bit early in the morning, isn't it? Oh, yes, thank you.
I think it helps get into perspective.
Yeah, so absolutely, it helps get things in perspective, and that's the aim of it. Thank you very much. So I want to now move on to the application process, and also this big topic of self-disclosure. And I'm just mindful of the time, so I want to make sure that I finish on time. So, the application process. You've chosen the job that you think you're suited to, and you've perhaps recognised some of the thoughts that might be getting in the way and worked a bit on them. So the next stage would be to actually complete an application form. And that might be online, or it might be in all sorts of different formats. And you're probably very much aware of this already, but it is really worth spending time and trouble over the application form. Really reading carefully the job description and the person's spec, recognising what the company, the organisation is looking for, and giving examples of how you meet that person's specification. And that involves doing homework around the organisation that you're applying to, so that you have some of that knowledge about it, which will stand you in good stead if you're then invited for interview. So it is really worth spending time over that. And then there is this very interesting question about, well, at what stage, or do I at all, mention that I stammer? And I think there are no hard or fast rules about this. I think it's a very personal choice. I suppose my view is, after having had a stammer and still stammer for so many years, and also the work that I've done with people who stammer, I think it's quite good to get it to actually talk about it early on. And I think that you can do it in the application process in such a way that actually highlights your strengths and highlights those particular skills and qualities that we as people who stammer bring to the workplace. So I've just shared with you some examples of what might be possible here. So it's about talking about your stammering and in a very positive way. So having a stammer means that I listen more, that I'm a really good listener. Having a stammer has meant that I've had to overcome a number of obstacles, and that's made me a stronger person. It might mean that I'm good at problem solving. Having a stammer has given me empathy and insight into other people's problems or difficulties. And these are just a few examples. Of course, it will be very much your view and what your stammering has taught you. But I think it's useful to look at stammering from that perspective. How has this actually helped me to be the person I am, and how has this brought out some of my strengths? Now, it might be that you decide not to mention your stammering during the application process, and that's absolutely fine. But then I think it's a question of deciding, well, when shall I mention it, if at all? Might it be when I'm invited for interview? And we'll go on to talk about that in a minute. But I think that if you would like some, what we call adjustments made to the interview process, you do need to let your potential employer know about them. Or it might be that you say something about your stammering at the interview itself, right at the beginning, so that the people who are interviewing you know that you have a stammer and can then really understand a little bit more what that might mean. So, interview preparation. So you've completed your application form and you've been invited for interview, and that's really exciting. So this is the stage where you need to get all your friends and family on board and to help you to practice, because that's what's going to make the difference between, I think, going into an interview feeling well prepared and feeling perhaps a bit less nervous about it, because if you don't do that, then I think it can be quite hard to go into an interview. So I think what matters here is, again, really looking carefully at the job description, at the person spec, thinking about what questions might come up, and practicing answers to those questions. And that's where you need your friends and family, and to do lots of role play, and so you get that practice in responding to a question. As people who stammer, we have the right to ask for reasonable adjustments. But obviously you need to let a future employer know that you stammer beforehand so that they can make those reasonable adjustments. And you might be thinking, well, what might those look like? So it would be about asking for extra time so that you feel under less time pressure. So if the interview is meant to last 45 minutes, you could ask for it to last an hour, say. It might also be asking the interview panel to let you provide additional written information before the interview, which will be considered alongside your responses that you give. And it might be that often the first step for an interview process, it might be that that's a telephone call, and you're well within your rights to say, look, that's actually going to put me at a disadvantage because of my stammering. The phone for me is more difficult. What I would really appreciate is a face-to-face meeting as the first interview. So those are some ideas of what you can ask for in terms of reasonable adjustments. Just to say, in terms of preparing for questions, it's also really good to prepare for what you are going to ask them. Because remember that an interview is a two-way process. It's just as much about you thinking, oh, well, do I want to work for this organisation, as it is then deciding whether you're the right candidate for the job. So I think, you have got power here, and remember that. So often at the end of an interview, as you probably know, they're likely to turn around and say, so have you got any questions for us? And really helpful to have some that you genuinely want to ask. So it might be something like, so where will the job fit into the overall team structure? What can I expect from you in terms of development and support? But obviously the questions that you might ask will depend very much on the role and what you want to find out. But that's a useful thing to do. So before the interview, I wanted to share with you also some preparation that you can do to build up your confidence. And affirmations, which I'm about to talk about, are a really useful way of, it doesn't necessarily have to be related to interviews, but a way of building up your self-esteem and also challenging some of that negative self-talk that you're aware of. If your mind is like my mind, our minds tend to give us lots of unhelpful messages. And a way of counteracting that is to think about some positive statements about yourselves, which then you practice saying to yourself once a day. So finding a special time to do that. It could be first thing in the morning or late at night, whatever works for you. And there are 3 guidelines to follow when producing a list of affirmations. Each statement begins with I, so owning the statement. Written in the present tense, because these are things that you know are helpful statements about yourself. And they need to be something that refer to something you've experienced about yourself and that you know to be true. Now, just say they don't need to be true about you all of the time, but most of the time. You can ask your friends and family for ideas. So sometimes that can be a bit scary, but also really useful. So what would you say are my strengths? And as I say, it's helpful to make a special time each day to say your affirmations out loud. And it's very much a way of valuing yourself. So you can write affirmations around you in the workplace. And I've just used some examples here. So I'm hardworking, I'm creative, I'm good at problem solving. But I would really recommend, if you'd like to develop your self-esteem, if you feel that, this is an area where I perhaps lack confidence, that affirmations have a really good role to play. And then some top tips for the interview. So just to say, it's okay to feel nervous. Anybody who goes for an interview feels nervous, and it would be worrying if you didn't feel nervous. And I think it's about being with those feelings, recognizing them, allowing them to be there because they are, and then really focusing on what's important for you in this job interview and why you want that particular job. So it's about believing in yourself and your strengths, recognizing your strengths, recognizing that you have got a lot to offer in the workplace, and the interview is an opportunity for you to explain that. A very famous quote from Oscar Wilde, so that's why there's a picture of him there, is "Be yourself, everyone else is taken." So it's about being true to yourself, it's about being authentic, it's about being real. Employers will see through if you're kind of not being true to yourself. So it's kind of saying, yes, I'm okay as I am, this is me, and this is what I have to offer. As you know, first and last impressions really count, and they've got nothing to do with speech at all, but how you enter a room, how you smile, make eye contact, that all-important first handshake. This is how you make a good impression, even before you open your mouth. And also, at the end of an interview, it's about thanking the interview panel for hearing you and for making time. So it's those first and last impressions which are important. If you haven't mentioned your stammering before the interview, it's not too late to do so, and I think it can be really helpful at the beginning anyway, even if you have mentioned it, because it might not have filtered through to the right people, that you talk about it. And it can be done in a very matter-of-fact way and in a dignified way. It doesn't need to be a big thing. It can just be something like, oh, by the way, I stammer, so I might take a bit more time. And you can also say, and is there anything you'd like to ask me about it? So just being open, being honest. Give yourself time when answering questions. I think that can be very helpful, not feeling that you've got to answer a question straight away and dive into it, but being able to pause and then say, give yourself time, to collect your thoughts before answering a question. And it's absolutely fine if you haven't understood a question to ask for it to be repeated. And sometimes the kind of questions that we get asked at interview are rather long. There might be 2 parts to it. So you can say, oh, well, I've got the first part and this is how I'm going to answer it. And then you might say, could you repeat the second part of it? So that's absolutely fine. So those are some ideas for top tips. I think after the interview is just as important as before the interview, because every interview that you attend is a learning experience, whether or not you got the job. We learn from all our experiences, and it's worth taking the time directly after the interview to sit down and think about, okay, so what went well and what could I have done better? And which were the questions that I really struggled with, that perhaps I wasn't expecting and I hadn't prepared for, because those are the kind of questions that might come up again. And my key message here as well is be kind to yourself, because it's so easy to go into critic mode and think, oh, well, that didn't go well, and that didn't go well, and I should have done this, I should have done that. But recognise what things that did go well, and congratulate yourself on those, and talk to yourself as if you would a best friend. We can be very critical of ourselves, and that can be unhelpful. And ask for feedback from the employer. So if you didn't get the job, then go back and say, be really interested to find out a bit more from you, what kind of impression I made, and there might be some key learning from them that you can take away and that you can then use for the next interview. Just mindful of the time. Yes, I'm doing very well. So I also wanted to highlight some resources that you'll find useful. Obviously, I work at City Lit, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about courses that we run. Just to say, City Lit is a specialist centre in adult stammering therapy. It's about 10 minutes walk from here, and this is what we do. We offer courses for people who stammer, and we offer a lot of topic-based courses. So we run a lot of interview skills courses, and we've got a 2-day effective communication in the workplace coming up in March. And it's designed for people who stammer, who've had therapy, who might not have had therapy, but it's a really useful environment where people who stammer can learn together and get support from one another and progress in that way. We're also running a 10-week acceptance and commitment therapy course. So this is a kind of approach that has been proven really useful for people who stammer to help manage thinking around stammering and feelings around stammering and moving towards values and value goals and taking those steps. And I think this is a particularly useful course when you are embarking on a new job or moving for the first time into the world of work. This can be really helpful to help you give yourself time to think about, okay, so what are my values around work and what kind of job I'm really interested in and how am I going to move towards that? The British Stammering Association has a whole wealth of material around stammering and the workplace. So it's well worth having a look at all the materials that are available there. And there's also a lot of useful generic websites which deal with the very important question of newly qualified graduates. How do you go about applying and for jobs and getting that job as well? So there's some great things there. And there's also you might have heard of Action for Stammering Children. They've got a project at the moment called Stambassadors, and this is a series of videos made by people who stammer who are working in a huge variety of jobs, and they talk about their jobs and how what they involve and how they've managed their stammering within the working context. So those are really helpful in terms of inspirational stories. And very helpful as well is the website designed by Alan Tara, who is here, on stammering and UK disability discrimination law. So again, there's lots of helpful advice there on reasonable adjustments and all sorts of questions that come up when you consider stammering and the workplace. So that's really what I wanted to share with you this morning. Thank you very much for your attention. And I've got a few minutes for questions. So I'd be delighted to take any questions that you might have. Yes, Tim?
Thanks very much. How would you respond if a company said that it only did interviews over the phone?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it would be important to have a discussion with them. I think if I were a person who stammers, I would perhaps seek help from the British Stammering Association to give me support in terms of requesting a face-to-face interview. I think that, I think it would be, if I felt that I would not be giving the best first impression through a telephone interview, I would try and argue quite strongly for a face-to-face meeting first of all. So I think if there's any way that can be arranged, I suppose it would be perhaps finding out what are their reasons for refusing that request, because I would see it as a reasonable adjustment, and therefore if they do not concede to that, then in theory, and Alan probably can correct me here, but they would be in breach of the Equality Act 2010, because I have a stammer, that is considered a disability, and therefore I need to have a face-to-face interview.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Tim. Tim, I would just kind of I'm adding to Rachel's great answer. I would say, okay, can I speak to the HR department, please, and then have a chat from at that point, because HR departments are incredibly risk averse, and if you do use the D word of a discrimination, you'll speak to someone really quickly, which is kind of an interesting point.
Thank you.
Just a reflection on everything here, and how would you kind of characterize the power relation in a interview situation? Because I personally, and my own perspective has actually changed from having done a lot of interviewing of candidates. Have you got any thought about how the candidates should see their own power distance in relation to the interviewer? Because the reason I ask is that interviewers have always got a problem to solve. They don't like aggro. They want to get people in post as soon as. So I just thought if you had a comment on the power and the relationship between the interviewer and the interviewee.
Yes, I mean, I think I do think that the interviewee has power within the whole process, because, as you say, the employer wants to get the best person for the job, and the interviewee is clearly showing skills and knowledge and qualities that mean that they are potentially the best person for the job. So I think that it is important to go into a job interview with that knowledge that the people who are interviewing you are really wanting to find the right person, and you potentially could be that right person. And I think it's also important to acknowledge that interviewers could be just as nervous as you are as an interviewee, that they might be new to the whole experience, and that they have their own anxiety, fears, etc. So I think it does get easier the more interviews you do, and that's why I think it's really helpful to do lots of practice. But I think that if you can kind of take your power into an interview, saying, yeah, this is a great job, I'm really interested in it, and I think I've got the skills and knowledge to do it, I think that puts you in a powerful position. Yes. I think just one last question.
At which stage of the application process would you mention this demo, like immediately with sending the application, or just after they responded to it?
That's a really, really good question. I think if you ask every person in this room, they'll probably come up with a different answer. I think it's best, I think depending on how you feel about it, I think it's good to actually talk about it in the application. Because I think it can show a lot of skills and a lot of knowledge, and I think that you can really turn the fact that you stammer into something positive about yourself. So that would be my personal advice, but I can imagine if we asked everybody in this room, they might say something different. So I think it is something that you need to kind of decide for yourself. And I think I need to finish there. But thank you very, very much. And I hope that I'll get a chance to meet all of you during the conference. And thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so can I please welcome our second speaker onto the stage, Mr. Ian Wilkie.
Good morning, everybody. Morning. Good. I've been described this morning as an inspirational role model, so well, that's quite a lot to live up to. The inspirational bit, I'm not sure about. The role model bit, the model bit, maybe not. But anyway, I want to talk today about thriving at work with a stammer. And with a sort of subtext, so actually in the context of breaking the conspiracy of silence at work. And so actually going to spend a bit of time focusing on that silence before get into sharing, I guess, some of the things I've learned in the 10 years I've been working with stammering at work. Before that, I pretended to everybody that I didn't have a stammer, put myself under huge pressure, and so it's going to be a kind of thinking about this issue of silence, and then sharing some themes and some of the things that I've worked on and that we brought into the work with the EY Stammering Network and the Employer Stammering Network. So, firstly, there's a paragraph on me in the book. Everything that runs through what I'm doing currently is my coaching, my mentoring, and everything that flows from that, using my business experience, my experience of founding the Employers Stammering Network and working with other disability groups, and working a lot in business and coaching. The golden thread is helping leaders to develop to their next level, whether that be future leaders, young leaders. So, for example, I'm working with a 23-year-old guy who has a job who stammers, and I'm working with a businessman who stammers who's well into his 50s. Sorry, he doesn't stammer. He's a non-stammerer. But with all my clients, it's about working alongside them to help them really grow to the next level, whatever that may be for them. That's really the golden thread of it. And I suppose, I think my credential for talking about stammering is I had a stammer since I was a little boy, and clearly it troubled me a lot in my childhood and my adolescence and a long way through my career. And one of the really decisive moments for me was nearly 10 years ago now, actually, when we were pitching for... I used to be an audit partner at Ernst & Young, so Ernst & Young is one of the biggest auditing firms in the world. There are 4 big ones, and Ernst & Young's one of them. I was partner in London, and we had a massive opportunity. It was the biggest audit opportunity to win a client off one of our major competitors, the biggest one in London for 5 years, and I was leading it. And people thought we were going to win. And because we'd done some great work with them and had some great relationships with this particular client, when it got into the first of the pitch presentations, there were 3 people on my team, including myself, and 7 people from the client, including the chief executive and the head of the audit committee. And I stammered a lot. And it unsettled my team. I could see it really surprised the client. And as the audit partner, you are expected to be robust under pressure. You have a number of really quite difficult judgments to make around accounting for certain issues, around how much work needs to be done, about what the regulator will be satisfied with. Most importantly, are these accounts what's called true and fair? It's a job where you come under a lot of pressure from a lot of different people. especially chief execs and audit committee chairmen, sometimes especially finance directors. So you kind of have to be robust. And I was really upset about it because I thought they'll never choose us. They'll never choose me and my team and my firm to be their auditors because stammering's a weakness. And I've had this weakness all my life, and there's no way they're going to have an audit partner who stammers. And it was a real learning for me because actually what I'd done is I'd showed it was no leadership around my speech at all. I'd kind of hoped it wouldn't, that I wouldn't stammer, it wouldn't go wrong, as I thought stammering was wrong then. So I'd shown no leadership. I hadn't collaborated with anybody. I hadn't even told my team that I'd been working on this for a year for. So I was sort of going alone. I hadn't actually done any work on myself. I'd had some speech therapy 30 years before. So for 30 years I've been kind of winging it and just hoping it wouldn't happen. I certainly hadn't really read up on stammering. If anybody tried to talk to me about my stammering, I absolutely didn't want to know. So I was very ill-informed about stammering. And I most certainly hadn't talked to the client and the finance director and the audit chair about it. So when they came under pressure, as I had a conversation with them later from other board members, and they talked specifically about my stammer, I hadn't prepared them for that conversation either. So it was a real case study in how not to do it. But I'm still here, and I'm talking about stammering. So anyway, I sort of thought that I'd sort of set that up as a theme that will carry through. So the aims is to share this journey of change for stammering at work, to share some themes that I think are relevant for the higher education sector and for students at university, faculty at university, people managing universities, and then hopefully to inspire you to lead change on campus and at work, and they may well be the same thing. I'm also going to do one or two things that I haven't done in presentations before, so I'm feeling pretty nervous and vulnerable up here. So just sort of ride with me if you can, even though there's coffee at the end of it. Okay. So this is a piece, I think it's quite good to set a baseline here around research that talks about strong evidence that work is generally good for physical and mental health. And that applies to everybody, and we know that if you have a disability in the UK, only 49% of people who have a disability are employed, who are in the employable pool, whereas 84% of people who don't have a disability are employed. So there's a big gap there. And clearly, within that 49% who are employed are people who stammer, whose speech disables them. That doesn't mean they necessarily have a severe stammer. Somebody with a very mild stammer could be, and often are, disabled by their stammer. So within that 49% stammering, and actually if you have a mental health condition, then only 31% of people are employed. So that, there's obviously a link between stammering and mental health. So all I'm saying is we know that employment and the right employment, not just any old job, is important for people who stammer. And there are 380,000 people of employable age who stammer in the UK. 50 million people who stutter globally of employable age. 50 million, that's bigger than the world's biggest metropolitan area, which is Tokyo, which is only 40 million. So we're a big number. We're one of many. But we experience barriers and discrimination at work, and we have a right to the same working opportunities as others under the Equality Act in the UK, and clearly morally, and as Rachel very well set out, we bring strengths and difference into the workplace as well. Sorry, I've got, actually I don't know how to go back. Yeah, okay. Being so this is a guy that I sort of feel looks like I felt many times with my stammer. I've got to go into a room and I've got to do a presentation. Perhaps it was that big presentation 10 years ago. By the way, we did win that client. I'm fearful. I might be embarrassed. I might be feeling ashamed. I might actually, if it was a normal meeting, just turn up late, so I didn't need to say my name. I might stay quiet. I might opt out. There's a whole load of things that I can do. But I know I've got to make that presentation, and I'm feeling really lonely. And my manager, if I've got to go into this meeting and make this presentation, she may be aware or she may be unaware that I have a stammer. You know, I was world class at hiding my stammer. She may know and she may feel uncomfortable about it, unconfident about it. She may be biased against it. She may be biased for me because she may have a brother or sister who stammers. She may be accepting, confused. Most likely she's just really busy. So I don't want to talk about my stammer because it's a weakness and it brings on all these negative feelings. She don't want to talk about it because it's confusing, it's awkward, and she's busy. So we have this unspoken agreement about speech. Let's not speak up for speech. Let's conspire together to have a conspiracy of silence around stammering. Between me and my manager, between everybody in my organisation and everybody else who stammers and everybody who doesn't, between employees. And it sounds like at universities too, which I'm really surprised about. 1964, I was a little boy. Paul Simon, how many of you heard of Simon and Garfunkel? Hopefully most of you. A very, very successful duo. Paul Simon wrote the song "The Sounds of Silence," and in it is this line that I think really plays to stammering. And no one dared disturb the sounds of silence, the sound of silence. No one dared. I dared not for 30 years at work. My colleagues dared not, except for a couple who did try and talk to me about it. No one dares now to disturb the sounds of silence. There's silence on campus. That's extraordinary. And this was 1964. 2019, Claire's talking about silence on campus. Wow. Let's just be silent for a few seconds and remember what it's like to have a stammer and feel that we can't talk to anybody about it. This takes me back 30 years. And in the naked light I saw, 380,000 people, maybe more. People talking without speaking, people hearing without listening. People writing songs that voices never share, and no one dare disturb the sound of silence. So, that young student that's going into a session on Monday where she has to read her essay out and she stammers, and no one's going to talk to her about it, and she's not going to talk to her about it. Or the young man that's going for an interview, or the businessman that has to make that sales pitch. There's silence all around. But there is good news. And over the last 10 years or more, we've been working to change the culture at work around stammering. Through, in my own experience, created a network at Ernst & Young, EY, where I was a partner. And then in 2013, alongside the British Stammering Association, as part of the British Stammering Association, we launched the Employers Stammering Network. It was really, really ambitious, really crazy. I mean, it was really not just a dream, it was a big dream. And the Employers Stammering Network, our vision is to change the culture at work so that everyone who stammers can enjoy and fulfillment in our career. In this world where nobody talks about stammering, that's a pretty big ask, to change the culture of work around stammering. But that's what the ESN sets out to do, and it's being successful. It's directly helped several hundred people across many, many different types of work. It's engaged with over 150 employers, and so we're winning. But we'd love for that change to be bigger and faster, and sustain itself and to grow more. So there's a lot of good news out there. That's hundreds of people, well, thousands of people, I'm sure. Millions have heard people like Jimmy Lang and Walter Scott and myself talk on national broadcast through the media. So millions of people have heard about the Employers' Stammering Network, the Defence Stammering Network. So there is really good news here now. But we have to keep on with this behaviour change. And when we talk about difference, diversity, inclusion at work, and we talk about gender, the percentages are 50-50. 50% women, 50% men. And then we have transgender as well. But that's a very different challenge to the challenge we have as people who stammer, where we have 1%, there's only 1% of adults who stammer. There's 99% who don't. So the challenge for the Employers' Stammering Network, when anybody is trying to change the culture at work, change behaviour at work, is how do we influence and help the 99%, as well as the 1%, understand more about stammering, be confident about stammering. It's a big ask. And it's courage that's needed, because it's uncomfortable to talk about stammering, whether we stammer or actually whether we don't stammer. To listen to a stammer we know is uncomfortable. The brain kind of stresses out. So that word courage, I'm sure many people know more about language than I do, but I do know that it comes from the Latin cor, for heart, and the French cœur. Never was very good at French, but for heart. Courage is from the heart. And I really think to change the world of work, we have to come from the heart, to come from within, that first decision within the heart to change. Courage to lead, courage to connect, grow ourselves and help others to grow, to start talking to people about stammering, inform them, and to gain sponsorship from more senior people. So I'm just going to go through these themes, because I think this is work. Well, I know this is work we've been doing with employers and with ourselves and people who stammer. I think these are themes that can be helpful in the world of higher education as well. And that's why I've selected these particular themes. So these are all leaders who've come through in the last 8, 9, 10 years, leaders of stammering networks. Many of you will recognise them. There's Captain Jimmy Lang, who is one of the founders and leaders of the Defence Stammering Network. May Breisacker, who's co-chair of the Ernst & Young Stammering Network now. Walter Scott, again a founder of the Defence Stammering Network. And Bethany Kelly, who's the founder of the Civil Service Network. So what are they doing? Well, and I think this is really important, they're leading in their own different way. Jimmy is very driven, energetic, enthusiastic, and sort of inspires you to do great things just through being Jimmy. And then there's May, who has this wonderful way of quiet leadership in her own really thoughtful, caring, considered way. And for those of us that were privileged enough to see her talk at the British Stammering Association conference in Cardiff on quiet leadership, what an example of authentic leadership that is. So these all have different ways of leading, but what they've all made is a decision to be public about how their stammer is affecting them at work, to be public about willingness to engage with other people in what are very, very, very courageous conversations. So that courage to lead is fundamental, but you don't have to be a type A person to be a leader. Research shows that many of the best leaders are type B, much more introverted, whatever. The best leaders are authentic leaders, but just where we can lead in our own way. This next one's really important, the courage to connect. In my experience, in my pitching for that piece of work, I didn't lead in relation to my stammer. I didn't lead at all. I just hoped things would be all right. That's not leadership. It was just the way it was. The courage to connect with others, because having a stammer, whether you're at university, school, retired, at work, can be very lonely, is very lonely. And so the power of the support group, the power of friendships, but it takes courage to connect. And I love this quote from Margaret Mead, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Connecting with other people who stammered. When I first reached out to Norbert Liegfeldt and Lise Geddes at the British Stammering Association, was the first time I'd ever, probably in 40 years, spoken to anybody who stammered, willingly. I'd shy away from people who stammer. So that courage to connect, I think, is really important. And therefore we, individually and as a group, Employers Stammering Network, individual company networks, the British Stammering Association, we have to be so open and welcoming, because to make that first courageous step to connect takes a lot. You know, how many of us have somebody come up to us and say, do you know you're only the third or fourth person in my life I've spoken to about your stammer, and you've never met this person before. So real courage to connect is needed, and you will be welcomed with a sense that, I will hope you'll be welcomed with a sense that we share so much in common, that doesn't matter that we've never actually met before. This is a group who've connected. This is actually taken at the end of one of our Employer Stammering Network workshops, the Redefining Stammering at Work series. And in fact, Bethany's there, who's actually trustee of the BSA now, on the second from the left at the back in a green outfit. And in fact, Sam Simpson's here, who developed those courses and leads them. So courage to connect is important. Courage to inform. Actually, you know, I'm trustee at the Business Disability Forum, and their great goal is to help employers become confident about disability, so they'll employ and invest in and promote people with disabilities. The government's picked that up, and the government now has a disability confidence scheme as well. And so I think it's beholden on us to help people who stammer, but the 99% who don't, to understand, well, what is stammering? Do I stammer because I'm weak? Do I stammer because I'm not very good? Or do I stammer because actually I have a neurological condition? Perhaps I have some strengths from my stammering. So the courage to inform and just to share information about stammering, I think it's really big, because that information can educate, and it helps employers to become much more comfortable and confident, and ultimately make choices about who they recruit and how they recruit. So we can't expect the 99% to get confident about stammering, because they currently won't be, because of all the stigma around stammering. We have to help inform and point them in the right direction. The Employers Stammering Network has a guide for employers that I think will be hugely relevant for universities as well. It's called Understanding Stammering, a Guide for Employers. It was originally written by Lise Geddes, who was chair of the BSA a while ago, and was significantly revamped by Helen Carpenter, who's here today. So I've got one copy. If you wanted a signed copy, I'm sure Helen would be delighted to sign it for you. But it's a really super. It talks about, what is stammering, but what's good practice, types of job, interviews, using the telephone, all that stuff, all in here. This is a great way to open a conversation with colleagues at work, or you could send it to HR, and offer them a chat over a coffee about stammering. A really practical guide. It's gone to over 150 employers in the UK alone have this, and people ask us for it simply because it's got a reputation. And then the courage to grow ourselves and others. We ran a mentoring pilot for the ESN last year, Employer Stammering Network. It had 10 young people who stammer, aged 18 to 25, and 8 mentors. A couple of us mentored two of the mentees. And lots of design features. A key one was that all the mentors stammered. So we had travelled that journey that our younger mentees were either starting out on. So I mentored a young man who just left school, is now at university. I'm actually meeting him later today to catch up and see how he's getting on. And I mentored a 22-year-old young lady. So a whole mix. Now, 5 of them were actually in university at the time. 3 of those were in their final years, so have already gone into work. 5 were at university. 4 were in the first couple of years of work, and as I say, one was entering university. So real fundamental transition points in life, as well as in your career, into university, thriving at university, out of university to thrive at work. So this was a big investment by the ESN. Also involved in speech and language therapists, in the form partly of Sam and Rachel. Sam's very involved in in the planning, in the launch event, and in the supervision. Rach was involved in the supervision. So fundamental role and opportunity for SLTs to become involved in if this is to be repeated. And we got the independent valuation yesterday, which is sort of independent and formal, and I can't share it with you, I'm afraid. But what I can, so that's sort of official. What I can do is unofficially say, it's fantastic, the feedback is, you can see my smile. Wow, I'm going to tell you, one pair didn't ever meet because of geographical challenges, but of the 9 pairs that did meet, they all said that the mentoring was either very valuable or extremely valuable to them. Wow, that's phenomenal, and a great credit to the potential that such a scheme has to be expanded geographically in many, many ways. So that courage to grow, and me for not to sit back when I sat in that presentation and hope that the Ian that had sort of stumbled through 30 years or whatever it was, then 25 years of work with his stammer was somehow going to land it in that big sales pitch. Sir Philip Rutnam is actually he's a permanent secretary at the Home Office, which is must be one of the toughest jobs in government. He's also the disability sponsor for the whole of the civil service, which is 430,000 employees. So having the courage to get to senior people, whether it's your boss or somebody higher up the rank or somebody on the board, it takes a lot. And actually, Scott was telling me the other day how he went to Sir Philip Rutnam and talked about stammering. And so Philip Rutnam's got all these other conditions and disabilities to think about, but he knows about stammering. And so here's a quote that by supporting our people who stammer, we can improve our communications culture across all departments and show it's the quality of what you say, not how you say it, that matters. Quality of what you say. So to have a leader like Philip Rutnam, who is the lead for disability, one of the senior guys in the Home Office, he's got 430,000 ears listening to him. So getting to senior people gives you air coverage, it gives you introductions, it gives you ideas, it gives you information, it gives you an authority to talk about stammering. And at EY, Steve Varley, who's the UK&I chairman, was fantastically supportive to me around stammering. He gave me a chance to talk to the 400 partners, either 400 leaders in the UK, official leaders, most senior people in the UK firm, 4 years ago about stammering at the partner conference. Wow, what an opportunity. Ian wasn't just talking to small groups of 10 or 20. Ian was talking to the 400 biggest opinion formers in that firm of 15,000 people. That's what senior sponsorship gives us. We have to be courageous to ask for it. So, how are we getting on? We're succeeding. This is a guy who actually had been stuck in his job, same role for a while, and working with us, he got the confidence to apply for a new job, which he got. And this is a person who I know well, who had never spoken to anybody at work about their stammer, came to see me, she was approaching a promotion, she got the promotion, and that was 2.5 years ago, and she's really thriving as a person and in her work. So my invitation to you, conscious of time, courage to lead with courageous conversations. I should have told people about my stammer at work. It would have made life easier for me and for them and for my clients. So I'm inviting you to do this because I've been putting a lot of work into this presentation. I practiced that singing, I know, and I know you didn't know it, but I practiced that. So lead, practice, please be courageous and have these conversations back at university, back at work. Connect. We're stuck. What a gift to the universities. When I was at university, there was nothing like that. I'm staggered that all the universities aren't falling over Claire, because she's offering this. She's been through that journey, and it was painful. And she's offering her experience and all what she picks up from all the different universities. So please connect in the way that I didn't do with my team, but please connect with Claire around universities. Invest. I hadn't had speech therapy for over 30 years. No wonder my speech kind of was disfluent under pressure. I don't mind about that now. But invest in ourselves, and through buddying and mentoring people. Now, the mentoring, we have to be careful around safeguarding and protecting our mentees and our mentors. So it's not just a question of, I live in York and you live in Bradford, let's get together and have a mentoring contract. No, it's got to be set up properly. But the power, what that mentoring program actually was developing helping another 10 leaders who stammer to develop. That's what it was. It was a leadership development program called mentoring. Invest in ourselves to grow, inform people about stammering, use the guide, use the videos that are out there. There's going to be much more of that coming from the BSA. And senior sponsorship. I don't know what you have. Oh, you have vice chancellors and things at universities, governors, trustees, whatever it is. Get to the really top. Get to the head of diversity inclusiveness. Get to the head of the student union. Get to the people who can actually influence much more broadly and introduce you to where you can make a lot more change a lot more quickly. So when might we do this? We've got Saturday today, Sunday. Okay, Monday. Let's do this. Let's get on it. It's been 10 years of changing the world of work for stammering. We're building this all the time. So my invitation is to do those things and to get on it on Monday. Thank you very much. Have we got time for a question or two? Was that a rude sign? Oh, okay. Two. Couple of questions. Was there a question? Oh, hi.
Yeah. Have you found access to work, which is done through Job Centre Plus, and they look at technological aids and things? Are they at all helpful to people in the workplace with a stammer?
I don't know the answer to that question. And this is but it is a bigger question, or it's a question about the direction of, the work that we do, that I personally do, is less about helping people get a job. It's actually more about people who are in work, simply because that's where I feel I can make the most difference. So I'm afraid I don't know. I don't know if anybody else knows the answer to that question about access to work, and which is for people with disabilities and how that plays into stammering. Do you know the answer, Gillian? Or? Yeah, please. I can find out for you through the Business Disability Forum, but yeah.
Yeah, just from a local perspective, from speaking to people, I think the experiences are quite variable. So employers have varying levels of knowledge about that. And then when they get into it, there seems to be a perception that it's only for certain things. So I know individuals have been told that they can only get things like altered auditory feedback or delayed auditory feedback devices through that, or they can only go on very specific courses that are time limited. So I think through that scheme, if they view it as a quick fix and they can throw some money at it, they're quite keen to do it. And organisations tend to be keener to do that sort of thing than engage with cultural change, which is maybe more meaningful and useful. So I think what I've heard is that the people's experiences of that is very variable. If it works, it can be quite helpful, but the person who stammers has to take a lot of responsibility on for organising that and directing it so it works for them.
Thank you. Any more questions? Tim?
I'd be interested to hear if you had discussed and disclosed your stammer at the beginning of your career, how it would have affected it over a longer period of time. And do you think that it would have been too early in the whole discussion around stammering at that stage? Is it only at this time that people are beginning to listen to you? And had you talked about it in your early career, it would have fallen rather on deaf ears.
Yeah, I think it would have definitely been a lot harder to talk about it. I mean, a couple of years ago I was at a drinks event, and one of my former bosses was there, and he hadn't seen him for about 5 years, and he came up to me and he said, "Hello, Ian Wilkie." Take the mickey out of me about my speech. And I took him aside and had a conversation about stammering. I saw him at a lunch. I do go to more than drinks events and lunch, but I saw him at a lunch. In fact, I sat next to him at a lunch just before Christmas, and he asked me about the work with stammering, and he was still mocking stammering. And I said, the world's moved on, and you still think it's funny to mock stammering. And so I tell that because I think that was the culture in the 80s when I started work, and and still is. You know, one of my somebody I work with has a lot of teasing about their stammer at work now. This is Britain 2019. I know it's a pretty crazy place, but come on, you know, this is a public company, a PLC, where this person works, and he's getting teased about their stammer. So I think it's about environment. I think it was a different world back then, but I think my career would it have been? I think it would have been different. Would it have been better? I don't know. I think I am where I am today. I think partly because of the painful journey I've been through, and the experiences that I've had. If I was to have my career again, I would definitely disclose my stammer and talk about my stammer much earlier on. I just think I left it. Maybe at the beginning it's very hard. I think it depends on culture, the people you're working with. But you know, to wait so long, I think I was just so hardwired that it reflected a weakness. And you know, what's quite amazing about that story about winning that big PLC audit was ultimately they decided my stammer didn't matter. And yet it had to me so much. But to the board of directors deciding on which 4 firms to choose, my stammer didn't matter. That's kind of a bit of a message that we think our stammer matters to people who are fluent much more than it really does, to most of them. And then there's the odd idiot who still thinks it's amusing to tease me about my stammer. Okay, thank you very much. And we have a break now for coffee? Yes, thanks a lot.
Ian Wilkie, everyone. So thank you very much. I'm afraid we are running slightly over schedule, so I'm going to unfortunately cut your break down to about 10 minutes. So if we could get back here for just after midday, that would be great. Thank you very much.
cry. 'Cause I'm only human after all. I'm only human after all. Don't put your blame on me. Don't put the blame on me. Oh, some people got the real problem. Some people out of love. Some people think I can solve them. Lord heavens above. I'm only human after all. I'm only human after all. Don't put the blame on me. Don't put the blame on me. I'm only human. I make mistakes. I'm only human. That's all it takes. Don't put the blame on me. Don't put the blame on me. 'Cause I'm no prophet or Messiah. You should go look in somewhere. I'm only human after all. I'm only human after all. Don't put your blame on me. Don't put the blame on me. I'm only human. I do what I can. I'm just a man. I do what I can. Don't put your blame on me. Don't put your blame on me. You can never know what it's like. Blood like a water freezing just that hot. Looking on the lonely light shine on me. Wind about the wreck of you high. Behind that mess of you. And think you think this book will never win. Look at me, I'm a coming back.
How you feeling?
I feel nervous. I always feel nervous. Like I just can't get.
It's fine. Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you've had a lovely break, and I'm sorry again that it was cut short slightly. Will you please welcome our next two speakers? We have Gillian Rudd and Abed Ahmed.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being with us here today, either in the room or virtually if you're live streaming in. My name is Gillian Rudd, and I'm a senior lecturer at Birmingham City University and a speech and language therapist. And I'm presenting today with my friend and my fellow trustee of the British Stammering Association, and my co-founder of the Birmingham Stammering Network, Abed Ahmed, who is a secondary school teacher at Washwood Heath Secondary School in Birmingham. In our presentation today, what we're going to be doing is sharing with you some personal experiences of stammering at university and some of our reflections on the advice that we would give others as a result of both our personal and our professional experiences in learning. We should have a few minutes at the end for questions, but if we run over, please do catch us during the breaks or at lunchtime, or if you are live streaming in, please contact us on Twitter. We would love to talk to you. So, without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Abed, who is going to share with us some of his personal experiences.
Okay, hi. First things first, it's my first time speaking into a...
microphone.
Sorry. Yes, so it's my first time speaking into a microphone, and so it feels a bit weird to just put this near my mouth because I'm usually moving my hands and stuff. So anyways, so I'll start my presentation. I think it's a good thing that we are at a university campus. I thought I'd get the full university experience by intentionally sleeping late and knowing full well that I've got a lecture first thing in the morning. So I do apologize if my stammer is slurred because of the fact that I slept late and I just had about 4 hours of sleep. I'm sure people who stammer know that if you are tired, you're more likely to stammer the following day. So I do apologize for that. Anyways, as you can tell, this was when I was really young. Of course, I don't have no facial hair here, and I think this was the first time that my parents said that they started to notice that I do have, a stammer. So I think I was 3, and my parents said that they definitely could tell that I was stammering from the major 4. Now, it's weird because during primary school, I genuinely can't remember that much about my stammer, because I think when you're just a young child, you're too busy just running around playing, and you got better things to think about. And so I did stammer from 4, but I do remember a lot of children were taking the mick out of my stammer, and I did think, why they take the mick, and I did realize that I was the only person who did stammer. At that age, I didn't even meet another person who stammered. In fact, the first person that I met, or the first time that I didn't meet someone who stammered was when I was 19, so a very, very long time. And so going through primary school was still tough. Going through secondary school was much better. I felt like that I was quite confident in school, and the reason why I felt that I was confident in school is because no one at school made me feel different. Of course, you still get people that would, mock you about your stammer, but, there are a lot of nasty people in this world. Sorry. There are a lot of nasty people in this world. So, my teachers, they rarely ever spoke to me about it. In fact, no one spoke to me about my stammer at secondary school. My teachers never, spoke to me on the side and tell me that they can't see that I'm struggling to speak. So, like, I'm not sure if that was a bad thing or a good thing. And my family weren't really that supportive. Like, my mom and dad used to actually tell me off for stammering, and they tell me, what's wrong with you? Speak slowly, calm down. Why are you in a rush to speak? I was never like in a rush to speak. I just couldn't speak fluently. So do I blame my parents? No, I don't really blame my parents at all, because they had like no idea as well what stammer was. And I think it's kind of a very taboo subject, especially in South Asian, community and stuff. There are like a lot of subjects and topics are very taboo and something that you just don't really talk about. So since I was probably 10, my parents just stopped talking about it. My friends never spoke about it. My teachers didn't speak about it, and I didn't speak about my barriers. So I did feel like that I was probably the only person in the world who did stammer. And as you can tell, this is when I did start to grow facial hair. And so this was just before I applied to university. So I was 17 at the time. And this was the first time that I started to really think about my stammer. I think you naturally become very self-conscious of yourself, especially when you're around 17, 18, and so on. So I did think, I have to go to uni, so I need to, leave my comfort zone, meet new people. And I was just generally not ready for that new stage in my life. So I was really scared. I was very nervous. I didn't know what was to come. I didn't know what uni was like. I didn't know what the people would say at uni. And at the same time, I didn't know that support was available. And I didn't disclose my stammer at all, like in my personal statement, because I genuinely felt like if I do mention my stammer straight away, it's a weakness. And I'm not going to lie, at that age, I felt like I had too much pride in myself to seek support. And I think research just said that men tend to not, seek support because it makes them feel less manly. And I wasn't a man yet, but so I just didn't want to seek support. I didn't want to accept the fact that I stammered. In fact, I didn't even research the word stammer at all until I went to seek speech and language therapy. So just before I applied to uni. So I think I was 17 or 18 at the time when I did apply for speech and language therapy. But it was 1 year later that I got my first letter back. By that time, I totally forgot that I even referred myself. So that was that before I applied for uni. And thankfully, I didn't have to do an interview for my degree that I chose to do. And personally, I don't feel I was even ready at all at that age to do an interview. And what I did next was, a few years later, I did apply to do my postgraduate. And of course, as someone who stammers, and as you do, you go into a job where you speak for most of the time. So I did decide to do my teacher training. And of course, I'll speak about that slightly in a bit more detail. The one before. Okay, as you can tell here, that was quite slim here. I was quite slim here, and then I decided to become a teacher, and we just went downhill from there. In fact, like in my teacher training year, I think I was 13 stones, and just by 10 months, I went to 15 stones. And so, teacher training year is tough. It's really tough. So, and when I get stressed, I just tend to have a lot of food. And thankfully, I think I've gone back down to 14 because teaching does get slightly more easier the longer that you are like in the job. So when I was at university, what I hated the most was the first week of university. I remember this activity. It was so silly. The lecturer, he got us to get into a circle. I think there was about 40 of us, and he wanted us to shout our name out one by one. At that point, I thought, where was the fire? I just wanted to run out. I generally did. I started getting nervous. I started sweating. I was like, because saying my name is the worst thing for me. It probably take me the entire 30 minutes to say it because it's really that hard for me. So thankfully Jill did say my name for me. And so everyone got around to shouting the name. And when it came to me, it always took me an extra 7 seconds. And the worst thing was that he wanted us to do a second round, a third round, and get faster at it. So I wasn't getting any faster. I was getting actually slower. And I remember people were getting annoyed at it. So I'm not sure if anyone even spotted the fact that I was struggling. So because of that, I refused to go to the first week of to my new modules. And just because of that, another bad experience that I did have at university was when I was doing my presentation. Usually it's fine to just have your name at the front, and literally last minute the lecturer said, we've got a video camera and you need to look straight at it, say your name. And there was 50 people in the room, and I literally struggled to say it. It felt like I was there for literally 5 minutes trying to get my name out, and that really did scar me for life. And I think since then I just get scared to do it. So that was another a really bad experience at uni. But there has been a positive impact from that because I did decide to speak up and seek more support from uni. I went to the student support and I told them that I do have a stammer. What I didn't like was she told me, can you prove it or show some evidence? I was thinking, I am the proof, I'm literally struggling to speak to you, but I can understand why they needed that as well. So I did get reasonable adjustments, and they did give me extra time to do my presentations. My friends, they loved being in the group because they got extra time as well, and but they didn't get extra time, but because we didn't need to do it in front of people, my friends were really enjoying that. So my friends were in my group, and we do it just in front of the lectures. In front of the lecturers. So and I felt like because of that, I started to get really confident in doing presentations, and I felt like it's now become a strength. But I'd like to think so. And so it's not all just negative. There are a lot of positives that have come out of it, and just. I'm just checking the time. So I did say that I did apply to do my teacher training, and I did have to do an interview for that. And I'm not gonna teaching was something that I've always wanted to do since I was 15, 16. And it's quite sad because a lot of people I know they tend to choose teaching as a second career, after something's not worked out. So teaching was something that I've always wanted to do. Which is quite ironic because it's something where you have to speak all the time. But I really feel confident in myself that I can do that job. So going back to the interview, I did disclose it this time because I really wanted it, and I wanted to give myself the best chance. And I remember my first interview, it was literally 4-5 hours because you have to teach a lesson. Then you have to do so many different tasks, and I genuinely felt like that I did so well. I left, and literally after 5 minutes, I got an email saying that I've been rejected. So that was tough for me. So literally just 5 minutes after the interview, and that day I remember I actually broke down because I broke down in tears, and because teaching was something I just thought, okay, this is the only thing I wanted to do, and to get that thought that is being taken away, that did put me back a lot. But then I had another interview, and a third interview at a different place, and I did get them both, thankfully, and that did restore the belief in myself that I can go on to really become a teacher. And even during university, I was a lifeguard, the perfect job where you don't have to talk. literally, like all you have to do is walk around the pool, and of course, you have to pay attention in case someone is drowning. But one thing I did like, part of the job was that I did have to jump in the deep end, literally, and metaphorically speaking, I felt like that's the way that I've kind of lived my life, just always jump in the deep end, and of course, please don't take that advice if you can't swim. But even if you can't swim, I did let some people go and jump in the deep end, but as long as they did have some kind of support, like some like armbands. So I would say is that even if you do have support, jump in the deep end, do what you want in life. Don't let people tell you that you can't do things. Of course, I did tell a lot of kids, don't jump in the deep end. But if they went with someone, then it was fine. So I do believe that if you have support in your life, just do what you want to do. And that was when I was at university. Now, as you can tell from here, this is when things got better. So I did become a teacher. I did get a job. That was at my local school. And I felt like last year was definitely the best year of my life because I've done like a lot of things. I think I didn't mention that I did teach in my local school. And the first thing that I did was run my own stammer support group. And we're a school where we've got 1,000 pupils. So if I did do my maths right, there should be at least 10, kids who stammer. And we had about 9, I think. And I remember the start of the year, the school was only like aware of probably 2 or 3 kids who stammered. But I did speak to the staff in the school to tell them what someone who stammers may sound like, what they might look like, and the group started to get bigger. So I do also support people who stammer. The new school that I work with, I'm still doing the same thing. I'm a maths teacher, and I also support people who stammer. Like in my new group, there's about 14 of them, and it's quite a big group. Like imagine seeing about 14 teenagers in the room who stammer. It's quite interesting working with teenagers, and there was a lot of things that I did do. I was on BBC like Amazing Humans, not me, but the children that I work with. They got to be on the video, and they really loved it. The people that stammered, and a few of the achievements that I received was I was shortlisted as the best new teacher of the year in the UK. Thank you. Unfortunately, I didn't win it, but the fact that I did get into the top 7 was a big achievement for me, because I remember a few years before someone at a teaching conference where they advise you to become a teacher. One of them told me that teaching may not be the best job for me. I'm like, why? Because I did tell him, would a stammer stop me from becoming a teacher? And he did say he probably would, so you should maybe try something else. And that did put me back a bit. I'm like, wow, okay, someone that's advising people to become a teacher is advising me to not become a teacher. And, so I like to think that I have done well to, be shortlisted as well. And I've done other few things. I did receive the BCU Alumni of the Year, BCU Alumni award. I'll be honest, I didn't know what it was until I got nominated for it. By the way, she nominated me for it. So that was another achievement. I was on BBC Breakfast on a week where they were talking about disabilities and stuff. So I was talking about my school. And me and Jill have done also a few things. We have started the Birmingham Stammer Network groups. It's a group for people who stammer that live in Birmingham. We're just trying to create a safe environment for them to speak about it. We have also done some conferences on International Stammering Awareness Days, and we've done a lot of those. And Jill, carry on.
Yeah, great. So, Abid and I have been working together for several years now, haven't we? And during that time, we've had lots of conversations about stammering more generally, but also about supporting individuals who stammer at university and in other settings. And so what we wanted to leave you with is some of our thoughts and recommendations. Whilst bearing in mind that everybody is individual, everybody would find different things useful, we did think that there were some recommendations that might cut across all of us. So in terms of our advice for individuals who stammer, we very much echo some of the conversations and the advice that you've already heard from Rachel and from Ian. Avid talked about jumping in the deep end. There's also this great book called Fear the Fear and Do It Anyway. That feeling of there are going to be challenges ahead and some of them are going to be really difficult, but you can absolutely do it. As a person who stammers, you are just as capable as everybody else, and you might even be bringing additional things to the job that people who stammer aren't. So please believe that and go for what it is that you want to go for. We want you to thrive at work. So Ian talked about thriving. We want you to thrive at university, thrive at work, rather than just survive. And part of the way to do that is talking to others. And that might be talking to the people that you know very well, people that you know are safe, seeking that support from friends and family. But we'd also encourage you to go and speak to the university, either your personal tutor or the disability team, the people who are there who will support you to make sure that you are assessed fairly at university, that you get the most out of your university experience. We'd also like to recommend you get in touch with people more widely. So not everybody finds support through their friends and family, but there are lots of other avenues out there for you. So think about getting in touch with the British Stammering Association, think about getting in touch with Stuck, think about those avenues through social media as well. If you're not a person who stammers, if you are somebody who works in a university, if you're thinking about how you might best support people, our challenge to you is to think about, are your teaching and learning opportunities, is your environment inclusive? Do you have what you perceive to be quite fun activities like the one Abid described in Welcome Week that actually are potentially quite difficult, potentially might exclude people, potentially might make people think that this isn't the environment for them? And how clearly do you signpost them to people so that they have some choice, some forewarning, some ability to think about whether that's a class that they want to come to and whether there's adjustments that they need? How do you ensure that your university, that your setting, that people there know that it's okay to stammer? How have you created that culture? How do you influence it? And we present this challenge to you, not expecting that you'll know all the answers, not expecting that you'll be there yet, but asking you to start pushing those boundaries a bit, start changing those barriers, start addressing some of those issues. And to do that through working with other people, so liaise with your disability team, liaise with the British Stammering Association, liaise with Stuck. And our final challenge to you is to ask you to spread the word. So the 22nd of October is International Stammering Awareness Day. If you haven't done anything at your university before, if you haven't had a conversation, think about making that the day that you do something, that you organise a meeting, that you organise a presentation, that you even go to an event somewhere else. Thank you very much for your time. I think we might have a couple of minutes for questions, very quickly. Oh, gentleman at the back. Oh, sorry, yeah.
Thank you both. That was very interesting. Abid, I was struck by that story, your first week at university. I advise academic staff around inclusive teaching. And on the one hand, I'm thinking it's good when tutors try and involve students and don't just talk at them. But so I wonder if you've got any tips for how a lecturer who wants to encourage discussion amongst students in a class, how they might do that without making it as challenging as your experience was.
Firstly, what I would say is I don't actually see that as a bad thing, because as a teacher myself, I still do those kind of activities, which is something that I should learn from. In my first week of school, I always get kids to actually talk about themselves, and it's bad that even I do it, but I do tell kids that like if they don't want to take part, it's totally fine. I do use a lot of mini whiteboards where they can actually write stuff on it. So what I would say for lecturers that probably want to do those kind of activities is give the students an option right at the start. Just say, if you're not comfortable with taking part, it's totally fine. And alternatively, like if they want to write on a mini whiteboard or something. That's the only thing I can think of, because that's what I do use a lot in school. So I would say just give students the option of taking part, because there are probably like a lot of students there that probably don't want to take part yet. Maybe like in the next few weeks, or they might want to take part.
Thank you.
We've got time for one more question, I think. Yeah.
Abid, I was wondering what experience you had with your disability support team at university. You mentioned presentation adjustments, but what else did they do to help you sort of adjust and integrate at university?
They did ask me what do I want, and I think the main thing I'd say that just some extra time would be beneficial. They gave me the option of doing it just in front of the lectures, so I did take that. Besides that, I can't remember like anything else they offered. Just trying to think, because I think those two things would probably be the only thing that would probably maybe support people who stammer. I think that was the only two that I can generally only remember, the extra time and the chance to do it just in front of your lecturers. They did say, by the way, that I need to do a presentation. I can't just do a written assignment for that, and that was something that I just can't not do. So those two were the only ones really.
Thank you very much, and please do catch us later with any additional questions you've got.
Gillian and Abed, everyone, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so our next speaker is Dr. Lindsay Pike from the University of Bristol. She will be using the Slido app for part of her presentation. So if you haven't already downloaded it, please do so. All the instructions are in the brochures that you will have got earlier this morning. So please welcome Dr. Lindsay Pike, everyone.
So good afternoon, everyone. As Claire said, I'm Lindsay Pike, and I'm speaking here really in my role as the chair of the University of Bristol Staff Who Stammer Network. It's a bit of a grand title. We are a relatively small network and quite new as well. But yeah, I thought this sort of question about what makes networks work well, both for staff and for students, is one that's really relevant to today. In terms of my own experience, I've really gained a lot from being part of numerous networks over my stammering life, I suppose. I went on the Starfish course about 10 years ago now, and I'm still sort of an active part of that. It's been great meeting people in Bristol, both through the university and a sort of local group of people who stammer and who want to, meet each other and learn about what works and support each other. And the idea to start a network at the university was really sparked by seeing Ian and Helen Carpenter speak in Bristol at an open day a couple of years ago, just before I was starting working at the university. I'm relatively new to a university context. The baffling structures and hierarchies are still, it takes quite a while to navigate those, I suppose. So I'd really like to spend the next half hour or so really sharing experiences about what's worked for you, and trying to sort of pool some knowledge so we can make all of our networks better. So just to start off, who here is part of a network or a support group for people who stammer? If you just raise your hand. So probably about 3/4 of the room, maybe half, yeah. And who's part of a network for staff or students within a university? 1, 2. Oh, that's Mary, who's in Bristol. Hi, Mary. Thanks for coming. Okay, so we're a minority. That's interesting. Good. Okay. Well, yeah, I think networks are really important. I was on a Starfish course recently, and I met a new person who is a student at a university right now, and he said he was in his final year, and he'd not been to any of the assessed presentations that he was meant to all year, so he just lost all those marks because of his stammer and because he'd not felt able to raise the issue with his tutor. And I naively thought that didn't really happen anymore, and that universities would be better at questioning, why has this student who never really speaks up in class missed all of his presentations? But obviously that's me being naive. So it feels like making sure that students know that they aren't alone is quite an important thing for all of the reasons that Deborah mentioned in the introduction. So to start off with then, what are the foundations of a good network? And please do feel free to chip in any ideas you have on the Slido app while I'm speaking. I won't be offended if you're all on your phones. It would be nice to sort of get some thoughts. The Bristol group actually met yesterday, which was it yesterday? Yeah, really good timing. So we were discussing this, and some of the things we raised were acknowledgement from the university, so making sure that they know about the network, that it's got some kind of central or senior level of endorsement, like Ian was talking about. We're quite lucky at Bristol. We've got a really proactive equality, diversity and inclusion team who are becoming much more structured about how they support staff and student networks, which is great. But yeah, making sure you know what resources and support your network might be able to draw on. Mary and I are both having our travel reimbursed, which is a bonus thing of that. So it's one of those things, if you don't ask, you don't get. So it's always worth asking. Making sure that people feel welcome, recognising that people will want to engage at lots of different levels. There might be people with loads of ideas who are really proactive, who want to do lots of stuff, and maybe there are people who've never met another person who's stammered and just want to listen and not really speak that much and not feel like they're being pushed into doing anything that they don't really want to. We mentioned a mix of being proactive and being reactive. So proactive stuff being, planning for, International Stammering Awareness Day, or trying to create an outreach program or some awareness raising thing. And reactive being just gauging from the group what they want or what they need at that particular time. So being responsive and leaving some space in sort of meeting agendas so that people can do what they need to or raise things that they need to at that time. Making sure, especially at universities where there can be a bit of a division between staff and students, that there are links between the two as well. We really want to start up a student to stammer network. We're making progress, but trying to find the best mechanism for reaching students is proving a bit tricky. None of us in our group right now, we are 4. So one person is a lecturer, and the rest of us don't have, like, strictly speaking, student-facing roles. So knowing how to find them is a bit challenging. And making sure you're providing peer support, laying some ground rules. So kind of all agreeing what kind of environment you want the network to have, respectful, leaving space for people to raise the things that they want to, being therapy neutral, so not trying to sort of promote one course, which is amazing, or, all that kind of stuff is quite important. And recognising that actually most networks do start out small, so not being disheartened if it's only like 2 of you to start off with. It's still a group. If it's 2, it's fine. Those were the ground rules that we sort of came up with. There's one thing, thank you, one brave Slido using person, which is saying checking up on one another, which I guess, making sure that you're all okay, being able to discuss the more emotional aspects of stammering, as well as maybe the more practical tips and tools and things. So I think that's a really good point. And thank you, Mandy, as well, who's saying keeping a group going can be really difficult, and as people get their help and then when ready they move on. That's a really good point. So how can we make sure they stay or they can continue? I think that's a really good question, because I guess you can't make people stay. I think networks work best when people gain just as much from being a part of it as they give back. There will always be people who are just part of it because they like giving and they like supporting other people. So if there are people who are ready to move on, I guess it's about checking in with them about what would make them stay instead, what kind of new direction that network might take in the future. And there's lots of questions now. I'm not sure how to manage this. So, right. I might come back to some of the other points and questions later on. With Slido, you can also vote for questions that you're most interested in just by pressing the like things. So do boost your most useful questions upwards as well, and I'll make sure I go back through them in a second. So my next thing was what are support networks for? Why is it worthwhile? And I found some quite cheesy pictures. Please bear with me. It's my favourite bit of PowerPoint. So one thing is about signposting. See, because it's a signpost. So being able to, provide advice where you can, flag up useful resources and materials, share experience as well, because, maybe there's one group member who loves doing job interviews and has nailed it and got every job that they ever went for. So, what's their secret and how might that be shared? A different thing, I wonder if you get my joke. So it's a McDonald's advert. Do you get it? So the thing you want when you order salad because you can't do bees, it's knowing that people in your group will just get the little quirks and the things that people that don't stammer just wouldn't understand. How sweet that first burger was when you managed to say burger, just this is the best burger. So it's that sort of shared camaraderie, recognising that stammering is painful, but being able to sort of share that pain and then laugh about it, because it can also be ridiculous. So managing that sort of shared experience. And then again, I really liked this picture because it's just sort of knowing that people get why you might be frustrated that you didn't say what you wanted to in that meeting, or why, if you're a student, why you're frustrated because you didn't do as well as you wanted to in your presentation because of your speech. One of my abiding more negative memories of university was I went for a position on society. I went to the University of Nottingham, and one of the bits of the election process was you had to give a quick speech, and I'd not really found the thing that either helped my control or my confidence yet. And so I wrote a speech, and then I asked another group member to read it out. And I just felt so ridiculous, just like standing there while this person next to me read out my speech really badly as well, which made it worse. And just that sort of frustration and being able to get that sort of I've also been there, and finding strength from that shared thing. And then there's practice. So one of the things we've talked about at the Bristol network is it's nice being able to create a sort of safe space to practice a presentation, or practice making phone calls if there are people who don't really like doing that, or practice a job interview. Because when you stammer, you can always practice in front of the mirror by yourself, but your speech will probably be all right then. It's not really the same. And just being able to do it in a really safe, nice environment where people will be able to provide you helpful and positive feedback is really, really useful. So one of the final things really is the different types of networks that there are. So the BSA website, which has lots of really useful resources about starting networks, says network support group rather is a group of people who stammer and get together typically once or twice a month. Each group has its own aims and methods of working, but all offer a safe, non-judgmental environment in which stammerers can share experiences. They may invite a speech therapist along as well, may practice speaking in public, or may just do more social things. And they generally need a sort of leader that makes it all happen as well. So in the literature, there's all these sort of groups mentioned. There's campaigning groups who are all about raising awareness or changing the system, man. There's practice groups, which might be more focused on one particular therapy. There's professional-led groups, there's peer support, and there's lots of different, student groups, work groups, national, regional, etc. So it's about choosing what sort of network works best in your context. And I've mentioned really a few bits that are going on at Bristol. The link with the central EDI team is really, really helpful. We've created a web page in a bid to sort of raise our visibility and profile, but one thing that struck me is that people would only find it if they searched for it, and staff networks about stammering, I think, are much less well established than, like the LGBT network, where most, big organisations probably have one now. So question I always have is, how can we raise awareness about ourselves? One thing we're starting doing is we've made some flyers that we'll be putting on a stall at the new staff welcome fair, which we hope will bring us some more fresh blood. And there's a plan to start some lunch and learn sessions as well from all of the different staff networks. So just the chance to raise awareness about supporting students, especially with academic members of staff, by going through some key stuff that people who don't stammer might not know. So I'm going to go back through the most popular questions. So Barry said, do you think a joined network for staff and students could work? Yeah, we've discussed this within our network, and the current members would all be keen. The one qualm I had was where we've got sort of lecturers who wouldn't want to talk about more personal things with their own students there, but that's not been raised by the one lecturer that we have right now, so we think it would probably be okay. We think it would be really positive, maybe having a mixture, so staff network and student network both meet and then have joined meetings every now and then, because it's nice for students to see people working and doing presentations in their job and using the phone and sharing their experience about how they got there. I think that role modelling thing is really helpful. Next question: how do we respect both people who are happy with their speech, who come along to a meeting, and those who have not accepted their speech? So with that question, is that about using techniques and things, or not sure? I don't know who asked. So I think one way of managing that is making sure it's a sort of non-judgmental and respectful environment, and like I mentioned, being therapy neutral. So I mentioned I've been on Starfish and I've discussed that experience, but I don't go saying you have to go on Starfish, it will change your life, because it worked for me, but different strokes for different folks. And I think that's about just being clear what kind of culture you want to create in your group, and probably the chair being clear with people who might not be respectful that that's not appropriate, and having the confidence to challenge that, really. But I don't know if there are any other people here with experience of that who would like to share. Raise your hand. No? Okay. Thanks, Ian.
Shall I repeat, or could people hear me? Okay. So the main difference I've observed in the networks that I've been involved in has, I think, been around the severity of the stammer, of a person's stammer. So there may be people where the stammer is highly noticeable, and people where it isn't noticeable at all. And I think it's not that I've experienced any or noticed any conflict between those people, but it is about, I guess, visible, invisible condition and inherent stammer and all that sort of thing. So I think just for me, it's about accepting that somebody's had the interest and the courage to come into that group, and that they will hopefully find what they hope to find within that group, and it's sort of not really for me to judge, but for people to feel that is the space that is positive for them.
Yeah, exactly, and recognising that individuals want different things from groups. There may be people who are looking for a way of controlling their stammer, and maybe people who are that's not their thing, and it's just about feeling more comfortable and accepting their stammer instead. And we all bring those different perspectives and experiences, and that's all really helpful. So yeah, I agree with that. So the next question, the next most popular question, was about recognising the different views of stammering, which I think we've just covered with the last point. Next one is about starting a nationwide support group based around a youth audience. Are there any ideas about how to reach out to a younger audience? I don't think I count as a young person anymore, so I don't know if I can help. Maybe Snapchat? I don't know. Does anyone know how to reach the youth? I suppose, I think what works well is just making it more of an acceptable thing to talk about, and by raising the profile of stammering all round in general culture, that will help younger people to sort of feel more able to discuss their own speech, and maybe make them realise that there are networks out there. I guess, it helps when you do have well-known people who can speak about their experience of stammering, and I think that's becoming more common in my experience. There's I can't remember her name now, but the actress, yes, thank you, who's been talking about her experience of stammering. So trying to sort of link, creating new national networks to those news items, and trying to build a profile that way, I suppose. But I don't know if anyone else has had any experience, or sorry, this person just.
I haven't had experience per se of setting anything up, but we have a son who's 16 who stammers, which is why we're here. We've been quite. It's been very hard because the school that he goes to, basically, it was an invisible disability, and we've sort of had a journey with them to understand it and put things in place. I mean, they knew he had a stammer, but he didn't have a statement, and it didn't become apparent until his second or third year that it was problematic. And I was thinking, and he was at the Michael Palin Centre for Stammering for many years, between the ages of 7 and 14. And then as a young teenager, he knows he stammers, but he's decided he doesn't want to be identified as someone who stammers. So I was just thinking how hard it is to reach that group, because he's kind of gone off it. He doesn't, he's fine. He does stammer, but I would love him to be in contact with other children that stammer, but he just doesn't want to at the moment. So I suspect he'll come back to that perhaps later on. But I'm very keen for him to. I said to him today, we're coming to this conference. He didn't want to come, of course. I said, 1% of the population stammer. That's 1,000 students. And he said, that's not very many, is it?
Yeah.
Quite unique. So I think he feels at his school that he's quite special.
Yeah.
And it's been a really hard journey.
I think that's a common experience. On a different track with Starfish, they do a young person's course, and lots of quite young kids get brought along by really well-meaning parents who really, just want them to sort it out before they start uni and start working. And they really have the best intentions, but the child just isn't there yet, and it's just like, why are you making me do this? But then quite frequently in their early 20s, they'll know it's there and be like, that thing, actually now I might like that. And just knowing about what's there is really, really helpful. So you're definitely doing the right things by just being like, look, there's help there if you need it. So
Just as we carry on there, I think the more we talk about stammering openly, the more it isn't hidden. And I think for our young people now, it is so important that stammering is an open conversation in all our schools, unis, workplaces, so that our 16-year-olds can actually say quite comfortably and openly, yeah, I have a stammer and it does hold me back and I need help. We need that conversation to be happening.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm being waved at by it from both angles because it's lunchtime and I wouldn't want to stop anyone from eating their lunch, but I'm really aware there are still a few people who have comments or questions, so we could pick things up after lunch. Would that be okay? Okay. So yeah, we'll remember who you are and come back to any last questions after lunch. One last nerdy image. Here's my contact details. If you'd like to discuss networks, please do get in touch and I'll be around and about. So thank you for all of your questions. I'm sorry I didn't get through all of them. It's not enough time, but yeah, thanks very much.